could just about make this a one-to-one. Yeah. Anyway, my name is Berny Goodheart. I'm with the PCI SSC PIN Transaction Security Group, and I'm here today to talk to you about the current cyber threat landscape, which is huge, and it's a real problem. Okay, that's my presentation. Thank you. Yeah. No, I mean, the situation is we're in a world that's changing so rapidly right now that it's becoming a bit frightening. So I'm going to sort of look at some of the trends and try and put you in the picture of what it's really at the moment. Let's see if we can get there. I should say to you that I'm from Liverpool in the UK. I have met a lot of Brits here, but I probably sound a little bit like Paul McCartney to some of you. Sorry about that. But I do speak the King's English, so, you know, it's normal for me. Well, sort of. It's new. Right. What we're up against is 40 billion records were compromised last year. That's billion. That's a lot of records, from account data to personal identification data. Quite frightening stuff that was stolen last year. And if you look at that exponential graph there, you'll see it's rising really, exponentially, funny enough. But last year, it was 580% more than the year before it. And the year before that, it was 320% more than the previous year before that. And it's growing. I don't know where it's going to be at the end of this year. But 40 billion records is a lot of records. And, as I say, they're after everything, personal identification, they're after account records, they're after IP, healthcare, government, finance, all sorts of information that they can glean. And, the problem we've got is that as we are in an industry where technology develops something to counteract these attacks, the actors are on it right away, and they're already fighting us back. So it's a never-ending game. Thankfully, it keeps us in a job, but it's a bit of a problem for us. So what do they want? Well, obviously, they want your ID, they want your money, of course, but also they want to cause a lot of other problems. They want to bring a company down, denial of service. They might want to bring a whole infrastructure down, a state attack, for example. It can be large organizations or small organizations. It might be a small shop, charities, non-profits, huge multinational corporations. They're just going for it. And, I'm not even talking about nation-state problems here right now. I'll delve on it very slightly later on. But you can see that these hackers are going for all different things. If you think that they're after your money, actually, you'll find that they're probably not just after your money, they're after a lot of other things too. So what we've got to do is we've got to look at the motivation, the reason why these guys are doing it. At the end of the day, it's all about return. They want a return, and they want the best and highest return that they can get. Now, I've mentioned here PTS POI devices, points of interaction devices. We've hardened them to such an extent that they're too difficult to hack. We've gone from, when I joined the PCI 8 years ago, we've gone from version 3 of the standard to version 6.2 at the moment. And we have done a really good job. It's almost, nothing's infallible, but it's almost impossible to break open these devices and hack them. It's just too difficult. It's not, let's put it this way, it costs too much and too much time and effort to do so. Whereas ransomware, well, it's a lot easier for them to apply. And there's huge stakes here. I mean, as you can see here, there's 40 million was the highest payout in last year. 570,000 was the average payout. And you know, these ransomware attacks, they're happening every 10, 11 seconds. They're just constant. And it takes about 21 days to actually remediate and clean up after one of these attacks. And that's a long time. I mean, for example, if your business makes $10 million a day, you know, a big, semi-big business makes $10 million a day, you can imagine how much money you're losing in 21 days. It's a real problem. Most common attack paths are things like phishing and software weaknesses. But as well as this, the social engineering attacks, attempts are still increasing, and they remain instrumental with malware, shift from consumers, retailers, SMEs, chief execs, even employees. They're going for everything, and they're having, you know, it's having an effect on companies. For example, they're harassing the companies, right down to the secretary, and it's bringing them down to the knees. So ransomware is a real problem. And while we're trying to make our devices secure with POI and DSS at the back end and so on, the ransomware is becoming a real issue. Now, looking at some of the hidden costs, well, downtime. And downtime is not just like downtime, it's the remediation of how long you're going to be down for and how to fix it, how to clean up from the mess. You've also got a customer support issue. You're going to have to deal with all your customers who suddenly are up in the air, don't know what they're doing because you've had a breach. You might have to replace all your equipment. You might have to throw the whole lot out and bring some new stuff in. It might be easier and cheaper to do that and quicker than to have somebody come in and rebuild devices and so on. Reset up the cloud. It can be a bit of a nightmare. Then you've got higher insurance. Insurance companies don't really want to insure you anymore against cyber warfare, effectively. They don't want to do it because it costs them too much. And they don't know how to size it. Then you've got lost business. I mean, you might lose business to your competition, or somebody comes on your site and it's down, they're going to move off elsewhere. So you've got the possibility of lost business because of the downtime. And then there's penalties and fines. For example, GDPR in Europe, which is now law, they're out to actually find where you are leaking data and to fine you for it. And you know, these penalties and fines are quite huge. You've got loss of intellectual property. If you lose your ideas behind what you've got as a patent, well, actually, a lot of these rogue actors don't care. When you lose your IP, you've got a real problem. And then you've got the issue of repeat attacks. I mean, when I say repeat attacks, is once they know that, you know, you're attackable and it goes down onto the dark web, well, that means everybody's going to attack you. And you end up with a situation where you've got repeat attacks. So while you're trying to fix up your 21 days from the first cyber attack, everybody's at you and you don't know where to stop. And it becomes a real problem. It's taking companies out of business. IBM came up with a document that basically states this. They say 4.24 million was the cost of an average data breach. And global average cost is about $161 per record. In the UK, 4.64 million was the cost of a data breach in the UK. And that only equated to about 28,000 records. I talked about 40 billion before. So you can see it's really quite a big issue. The average cost of a mega breach is about 52 million. $52 million. And right now, for the pound, that's a lot of money. So let's look at some of how we are mitigating against these attacks. Now, I'm not here to tell you how to mitigate against them. That's a whole, that can't be done in 20 minutes, and I've only got 10 minutes left anyway. So I'm not going to tell you how to do it, but these are some of the things that are being implemented to mitigate against them. So first of all, Linux is being used. Linux is pretty much used on most devices now, whether it's POI devices or mobile phones or back-end systems on the GUIs, running Android or whatever. But the point is they're running mostly Linux. And the thing is, the neat thing about Linux is it was designed securely with security from the ground up. And it's transparent. What I mean by transparent is it runs on open source, which means that any vulnerabilities in the OS, and by the way, there are always vulnerabilities in an OS, doesn't matter what OS it is, they're usually fixed up because, before the attacker can get there, because the code is constantly being reviewed. And as soon as they see, there's so many tens, if not hundreds of thousands of people working on it, that something's flashed and it's actually instigated and worked on right away. And it's basically undergoing constant review. And any vulnerabilities are highly scrutinized and sorted out. But then again, you've got also all these things built in, like boot security. There's good patching mechanisms. It's got secure root and login stuff like that. Then there's SE Linux, which is the Secure Enclave Linux, which was NSA's originally in the back when it first came out. So, Linux provides an attack surface that is mitigating, it's providing a surface that is mitigating the attack surface against these attackers. We've also got Android. Android sits on top of Linux. Android provides its own security features in many ways. First of all, it's constrained by the operating system that it runs on. So a process will run in its own JVM, Java Virtual Machine. It will run in its own Linux process with its own access permissions and its own user ID. So it's sort of enveloped or enclaved each app as it runs. And they're constricted by the underlying OS. So Linux basically looks after a lot of the security built-in features, using its built-in features. Apps are restricted from interacting with other apps when they run, and they've got a significantly reduced attack surface because they each manage their own components. So an app that runs on Android, which runs on Linux, manages its own components. What I mean by that as an example is it might have its own password storage, which another app can't get access to because it's secure in its own enclave. There are ways you can get around that by writing security policy intents. So if you have an implementation that you need to go and do something specific, you can get around it, but in general, by default, you can't. The downside to Android is that you can actually load untrusted source-based apps, and that is a problem. You can go to a different store and download or bring an app that is not very secure. And then there's iOS. Apple's iOS has been, we've seen it to be extremely secure. The neat thing that I like about iOS is that it is proprietary. So nobody gets access to the code, and therefore they can't try to find all the holes that possibly might exist within it. And the other thing is that Apple look after and do all their own remediation. And they run things like bug bounty shops to get people to try and break their systems. And it's a very, very secure OS. And so this is another thing that we're doing in the world right now in our devices, is running operating systems like iOS or Android or Linux to mitigate this attack surface. The other one, of course, is we've been using strong passwords. PIN has always been quite an important feature for us, I mean, we all taught from our children to our grandparents about PIN, and to keep it secret and not to give it away. It's interesting because there's only 10,000 numbers. I used to have a slide which showed from 0000 to 9999, the full 10,000, and I asked people in the audience, give us your PIN. But of course, they wouldn't give you the PIN. But the PIN without the PAN is useless anyway, so it doesn't matter. I mean, if I said to you PIN number 3496, somebody out there, well, actually, there's only about 30 of you there. Yeah, but somebody out there might have that number. Point I'm getting to is that we're using PINs. We're now asking people to use strong passwords, and we want people to try and, we're trying to encourage people to use difficult passwords or passphrases rather than just general passwords, and use password programs to conceal many different types of passwords that you hopefully implement for each individual site that you go to. But of course, what we really want is you to move away from passwords, and we want you to start using multi-factor authentication. And MFA is implemented in several different ways, from biometrics to things like out-of-band SMS messages to verify. But the point is MFA is possibly the only way we can move forward right now to try to ensure that we have a secure transaction taking place. In the UK, almost all of the banks are using MFA. And in fact, I don't know of any mainstream bank in the UK that doesn't use MFA, to the effect that if I buy something online, I always have to use MFA. And then you've got ourselves, PCI. As I say, I work for the PTS group. Our terminals, we're currently at version 6.2 with the standard. The neat thing here is that we're making purpose-built, hardened devices for our industry. And we've grown that standard up over many, many years. All the devices are monitored. They're all protected by tamper. I mean, you only so much as have to sneeze on these devices and they'll tamper. And they're all evaluated via strict compliance to via an accredited PCI accredited lab. So, for our devices in our industry, we got it. We got the deal right now. There's not a problem. It's other things that the issue is. Let's talk a little bit quickly about GDPR. GDPR is law in the EU. They are going out there to get you if you leak data via a data breach. Global organizations, as you can see, 847 million is a fine. I mean, large hotel chain, 23 million. That bottom line might seem a small number, but 23 million is a lot of money. So it's a big thing, and if you lose customer data, you're very likely to get fined. And the problem with this being fined by the regulator is that you might then also be faced with a class action suit from the people that your data is leaked from. And so you have this snowball effect. You've got state-sponsored crime. Rogue states will go out there to try to bring a infrastructure down, the electricity company, the water board. And the problem with this is that it's extremely challenging. It's very difficult to sort out. Back if you take some of these GCHQ and MI5 and MI6 and all the others in the UK, they're fighting this is one of the biggest issues they have, is worrying about rogue state cybercrime. Insurance, I didn't mention it before. There's been so many payouts in 2021 that a lot of these insurance companies now, they don't want to insure you, but if they do, they'll have strict restrictions on the insurance, which makes it almost impossible to insure against cyber attacks. it's extremely difficult and challenging to stop this because basically the insurance companies, they're in business for themselves. They're out there to make money, and if they're not making money, then they don't exist. So we have a problem because, as I said at the beginning of the slide set, you know, we're at 40 billion for last year. I don't know what the answer is for this year coming. Anyway, in summary, I just wanted to get my own opinions across here. We need to continue to follow the PCI security standards, obviously, because, you know, we seem to be leading in all fronts against this. We also need to develop best practices to mitigate cyber attacks. What would be really good is if we could develop and provide a global secure platform where we all knot our heads together, not just the PCI, but all the other organizations and companies and intelligence agencies, and we try to build something that, you know, some sort of a standard where we can fight against these ransomware and cyber criminals. And at that point, I finished my presentation. Thank you. Thank you.